sky has witnessed the rise and fall of countless war machines, but the B-52 Stratofortress refuses to fade into history. First deployed to be an unstoppable force at the height of the Cold War, this aircraft has ruled the skies, defying time, evolving with technology, and proving its dominance in modern warfare. But now the US has unveiled something even more shocking, an upgraded B-52 designed to soar for a full 100 years. How did they achieve this? What cutting-edge advancements make this possible? And what does it mean for the future of air power? Join us as we reveal the new B-52s and its capabilities that will change the battlefield forever. The B-52 Stratofortress, better known as the Buff, meaning big ugly fat fellow, among American troops, was first conceived in the final years of the Second World War, at least as a concept. By 1946, the blueprint for this legendary bomber was set in motion, and 6 years later, on April 1952, the prototype soared into the skies. From its early days, the B-52 has undergone massive transformations. The original Boeing Model 462 was a straight-wing design powered by 6 turboprop engines, weighed around 360,000 pounds, and had a combat radius of just over 3,100 miles. Compare that to today's version, which boasts 8 powerful turbojet engines, a weight of 480,000 pounds, and a staggering 880-mile combat radius, nearly 3 times the reach of its predecessor. When it first entered service, the US military had one main goal for the B-52: counter the growing power of the Soviet Union. The Cold War was heating up, and with the Soviets rapidly expanding their nuclear arsenal, the US needed a bomber that could strike deep into enemy territory. And that was when these bombers became an ever-present force in the sky. Under operations with code names like Chrome Dome and Giant Lance, B-52 patrolled the edges of Soviet airspace, prepared to launch an immediate strike if war began. These flights were a key part of the US's nuclear deterrence strategy, which was based on the idea that any attack would trigger destruction for both sides, a concept known as mutually assured destruction, MAD. But as missile technology advanced, flying high in enemy airspace became too dangerous. After a U-2 spy plane was shot down over the Soviet Union in 1960, the strategy shifted. Instead of high-altitude bombing, the B-52 was reworked into a low-flying attack aircraft, skimming just a few hundred feet above the ground to avoid radar detection. Flying at speeds of 400 to 440 miles per hour, it was now built for stealthy penetration rather than brute force bombing. The aircraft was outfitted with nuclear missiles, decoy systems to confuse enemy defenses, high-tech jamming equipment, and the ability to fly incredibly low, avoiding Soviet radar and missile threats. By 1963, every operational B-52, except the oldest models, had been transformed into a more lethal and versatile aircraft. Then came Vietnam. As the conflict escalated, the US modified dozens of B-52Fs, giving them external bomb racks to carry massive payloads. Still, as the war escalated, the US decided the B-52 needed more firepower. By late 1965, engineers rolled out the Big Belly upgrade, allowing the aircraft to carry far more bombs. The external racks remained the same, but inside the bomb bay was transformed. Instead of 27 bombs, the B-52D could now hold 84, packing a total payload of 60,000 pounds. These modified bombers replaced the older B-52Fs and entered combat in April 1966, launching from Guam. The B-52s weren't just used for large-scale bombings. In November 1965, they played a key role in the Battle of Ia Drang, marking their first use in direct combat support. The sheer force of their strikes was overwhelming. Just 6 B-52s, flying at 30,000 feet, could wipe out everything in a massive 2-mile-long blast zone. The shock waves from these bombings were so powerful that people in Saigon, miles away, could feel the ground tremble. But the enemy was relentless. On November 22, 1972, disaster struck. An enemy missile over Vinh hit a B-52D flying from Thailand. The crew had no choice but to eject over Thailand, marking the first time a B-52 was destroyed by enemy fire. The world once believed the B-52 was unstoppable, until the enemy in Vietnam proved otherwise. Approaching the mid-60s, the US military was starting to lose faith in the aircraft, So the B-52Bs were retired by 1966, followed by the C models in 1971. The B-52s went through waves of retirements. Older models like the ES and Fs were phased out between the late 60s and early 70s, while the D models held on longer, undergoing upgrades in the mid-1970s. The Air Force reinforced their structure, replacing skin on the wings and fuselage to keep them in service. Even then, most were retired by the early 80s. The remaining B-52Gs and Hs played a crucial role in America's nuclear defense, standing by on high alert. When the B-1 bomber was introduced, it was meant to replace the B-52, but it only took over for older models. In 1991, the B-52s finally ended their continuous 24-hour nuclear standby duty. Lessons from Vietnam forced a major shift in the way the B-52s were used. The aircraft were upgraded with new missiles, improved defense systems, and better avionics. The G and H models were equipped with supersonic short-range nuclear missiles, allowing them to strike without flying directly into enemy defenses. Advanced countermeasures helped them evade radar, while new low-light cameras and infrared systems made low-altitude flying safer. A plan to use radar-reflecting decoys to confuse enemy defenses was even developed, and the idea later evolved into the cruise missile. These upgrades made the B-52 heavier and reduced its range, but the added firepower and survivability were well worth the trade-off. Though aging, the B-52 adapted to new threats and refused to fade into history. When the Soviet Union collapsed, the US had to follow a major disarmament deal, the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty. As part of the agreement, every remaining B-52G had to be destroyed. The Aerospace Maintenance and Regeneration Center sliced 365 of these bombers into scrap. To ensure compliance, Russian officials used satellites and on-the-ground inspections to confirm that these legendary war machines were gone for good. Why would they go to such lengths if the US Army had lost its faith in it? Well, the B-52 wasn't just a bomber, it was a multi-role powerhouse. It scanned vast stretches of the ocean, launched devastating anti-ship strikes, and even dropped underwater mines to control key waterways. In just 2 hours, a pair of B-52s could survey an area the size of California, an ability that made them crucial for naval warfare. Even as recently as 2018, during a massive military exercise, B-52s proved their relevance by simulating a counter-invasion near Sweden, showing the world they were still a force to be reckoned with. In terms of maritime operations back in the 1970s, the US Navy faced a constant threat from Soviet Tu-22M backfire bombers, armed with long-range missiles capable of overwhelming defenses, along with Soviet warships stacked with deadly firepower. If the attack were big enough, even America's mighty aircraft carriers wouldn't survive. So to balance the battlefield, the B-52 was immediately deployed and it shifted the odds. Normally built for long-range bombing, some B-52Gs were upgraded to carry Harpoon anti-ship missiles. These bombers, stationed in Guam and Maine, were ready to work alongside aircraft carriers in both the Atlantic and Pacific. In a war, B-52s would strike Soviet ships from the sides, forcing the enemy to scatter. They could also drop mines in key waterways like the Gyuk Gap and the Kuril Islands, making Soviet movements risky and unpredictable. By the 1980s, B-52As were packing even more firepower: cruise missiles, laser-guided bombs, and advanced navigation systems. Pilots trained in low-altitude, sea-skimming maneuvers, perfecting a sneaky approach to take out enemy ships before they could react. Fast forward to today, and the challenge has shifted. China's Navy is growing fast, and the US Air Force is adapting once again. Modern B-52s now carry quick-strike mines equipped with JDAM-ER guidance, letting them create deadly minefields from over 40 miles away with pinpoint accuracy. To boost their ocean surveillance capabilities, B-52s have been upgraded with the Dragon's Eye radar pod, which allows them to scan massive areas of the Pacific. Combined with the lightning infrared targeting system, these upgrades make the B-52 a serious maritime threat even in modern warfare. Another thing that makes this aircraft a threat to the enemy even after it is retired is that it remains a threat until it is completely scrapped. In 2008, some B-52 bombers were being retired and sent to the boneyard at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base, a resting place for old aircraft. But just because a plane was parked there didn't mean it was gone forever. In 2015, a bomber named Ghost Rider was pulled out of storage after 6 years and brought back to life. Then in 2019, another aircraft, Wise Guy, which had been sitting there since 2008, was resurrected. A small team of mechanics worked non-stop for 4 months to restore it, proving that even after a decade of being grounded, these planes could still return to the sky. Despite being in service since the 1950s, the B-52 isn't going away anytime soon. The U.S. Air Force continues to upgrade and maintain these bombers, keeping them in top shape at places like Tinker Air Force Base. Even with new stealth bombers on the horizon, the B-52 is expected to keep flying until at least 2050, an incredible 95 years after it first entered service. No other military aircraft has ever stayed active for that long. One of the biggest challenges of keeping these bombers operational is their aging engines. Back in 1996, Boeing and Rolls-Royce came up with a bold idea: cut the number of engines on the B-52 from 8 to 4 by using bigger, more powerful ones. The plan looked great on paper. It promised better fuel efficiency, a longer flight range, and even lower emissions. But when the Air Force ran the numbers, the reality was disappointing. Instead of saving money, the switch would actually cost taxpayers an extra $1.3 billion. In the end, the classic 8-engine setup stayed, keeping the bomber's iconic look intact. Years later, in 2003, a Defense Science Board report challenged that decision. Experts argued that 4 engines would be the smarter move in the long run, cutting fuel costs and giving the aircraft more endurance. But there was a catch. Switching to 4 engines would mean major changes to the aircraft's structure, especially the rudder control system. That meant more time, more money, and a lot more complexity. So even the upgraded B-52J would keep the traditional 8-engine layout. By 2020, the Air Force announced a massive plan to replace the engines in use with new commercial engines. Companies like General Electric, Pratt & Whitney, and Rolls-Royce all fought for the contract. Still, in 2021, Rolls-Royce's F-130's engines won the deal, securing a $2.6 billion order for 608 engines and 42 spares. In 2022, Boeing was deep into its commercial engine replacement program. A newly released video showed wind tunnel testing of the modified B-52, revealing a striking change. The engines were sitting in freshly designed nacelles, housing 2 Rolls-Royce F-130 engines each. But that wasn't the only thing people noticed. The updated B-52J also had a redesigned nose that looked more like the bomber's early prototypes. For decades, B-52s had a pair of bulky enclosures under their noses, added in the 1970s as part of the electro-optical viewing system. These housed an infrared night vision system and a low-light television camera, helping pilots fly at low altitudes and giving the bomber some basic surveillance abilities. But with modern warfare shifting away from Cold War-style low-level penetration missions, these outdated systems became less useful. Today, most B-52s rely on high-tech targeting pods mounted under the wings instead. The new B-52J isn't just getting better engines, it's also getting a major radar upgrade. Its redesigned nose will house the Raytheon APG-79 active electronically scanned array radar. This system will give the bomber sharper vision, greater accuracy, and better resistance to enemy countermeasures. The latest B-52J prototype has introduced some noticeable upgrades, and one of the most striking changes is the new pylons under its wings. These aren't just for show, they're designed to handle some serious firepower. One of them, positioned under the right wing, is expected to carry the AGM-183A air-launched rapid response weapon, a hypersonic missile weighing around 7,000 pounds. Back in 2021, Boeing hinted at developing new heavy-duty pylons capable of holding up to 20,000 pounds each. That means the B-52J won't just be carrying hypersonic weapons, it'll also be able to haul more of its existing arsenal, making it even deadlier in combat. Even with modern upgrades, the inside of the cockpit is like stepping back in time. The layout still has a distinct 1960s feel. Pilots often joke that flying the B-52 is like being in Dr. Strangelove, Stanley Kubrick's classic 1964 film. But despite its old-school appearance, the controls are fully capable of launching some of the most advanced weapons in the U.S. military's inventory. On March the 17th, 2024, the U.S. sent a message loud and clear by test launching an AGM-183A AR-RW hypersonic missile from a B-52H over Guam. Just 48 hours later, they did it again in the same region. This wasn't just a routine test. It sent shockwaves through China and Russia, and some believe it was also a way to reassure key U.S. allies of America's air dominance. The B-52's role in nuclear warfare has also evolved. In the 2010s, the U.S. military stopped assigning B-61 and B-83 atomic bombs to the Stratofortress, leaving that job to the stealthy B-2 Spirit. But looking ahead, the B-52J is expected to be armed with the upcoming long-range standoff nuclear cruise missile, bringing back its strategic nuclear strike capabilities. So why does the U.S. still rely on this decades-old bomber? Simple, it works. In conflicts where enemies lack high-end air defenses, the B-52 remains a cost-effective powerhouse. It can loiter in the air for hours, strike targets from a safe distance, and provide vital support to ground troops. In wars like Operation Iraqi Freedom, the B-52 proved its worth time and time again. Even when compared to other bombers, the B-52 still holds its own. Between 2000 and 2001, it had the highest mission-capable rate of any U.S. heavy bomber, averaging 80.5%. In contrast, the B-1B sat at 53.7%, while the B-2 lagged at just 30.3%. Sure, flying a B-52 costs around $72,000 per hour, more than the B-1B, but far less than the eye-watering $135,000 per hour for the B-2. On November 12, 2015, the legendary B-52 bomber once again proved its relevance in modern warfare. Flying straight into contested airspace over the South China Sea, it directly challenges China's territorial claims over artificial islands. Chinese forces quickly ordered the aircraft to leave, but the American crew refused to acknowledge their authority. It was a bold move, a clear statement that the United States would not accept China's expanding control over the region. The message was simple. Freedom of navigation was non-negotiable. Just 2 months later, tensions in Asia escalated again. On January 10, 2016, a B-52 took to the skies over South Korea, escorted by South Korean F-15K fighter jets and American F-16s. This was no routine flight. It was a direct response to North Korea's alleged hydrogen bomb test, a show of strength to remind Pyongyang that the United States and its allies were watching. By April 2016, the B-52 was once again on the move, this time to the Middle East. It was deployed to Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, taking over heavy bombing missions from the B-1 Lancer in the fight against ISIS. The transition made sense. The B-52, with its massive payload capacity and endurance, was perfectly suited for sustained air campaigns. Soon after, the bomber was dispatched to Afghanistan, where it provided close air support to ground forces. Some might have called it a relic of the Cold War, but the B-52 proved it was still a precision war machine capable of delivering devastatingly accurate strikes. The following years saw the B-52 continue to shape conflicts around the world. On February 7, 2018, it played a key role in a massive airstrike against pro-government forces in Syria. The strike was part of an operation to protect U.S. allies and deter hostile forces in the region. 3 years later, in 2021, the B-52 was once again in action, this time targeting Taliban positions in Afghanistan. As the Taliban swept across the country in their rapid takeover, the American bomber was used to slow their advance, striking key targets and reinforcing Afghan security forces in their desperate struggle. By 2022, the B-52 was not just proving its combat effectiveness, it was also helping push the boundaries of military technology. It became the launch platform for a hypersonic missile test, an important step toward developing next-generation weapons capable of striking at unprecedented speeds. Around the same time, reports emerged that the U.S. planned to deploy 6 B-52 bombers to Australia's RAAF Tyndall base. Even in 2024, the B-52 was still shaping global events. On November 3rd, the United States confirmed that the bombers from Minot Air Force Base had arrived in the Middle East as part of a broader military strategy. Their presence was a warning to hostile forces in the region that American air power was ready to strike if necessary. Then on December 8th, the B-52 was at the center of one of the largest aerial assaults in recent history. Teaming up with F-15E fighters and A-10 attack aircraft, the bombers launched a massive wave of airstrikes in Syria, hitting over 75 ISIS targets. The timing was significant. It came just days after the fall of the Assad government, marking a dramatic shift in power in the region. Whether launching hypersonic missiles, leading large-scale bombing campaigns, or standing as a deterrent against aggression, the B-52 has proven that sometimes the oldest warhorses still pack the biggest punch. Thanks for watching. While you are still here, click on the link on your screen to check out another of our videos. See you there.